High Court is hearing numerous other controversial issues and its first high-profile case of the term, Childs versus Salazar. It considers whether a Christian counselor's work with children who struggle with gender discordance and same-sex attraction is protected under the First Amendment.
Issues of gender and sexuality come up regularly with my clients in our counseling conversations. And Colorado's law would hover over every conversation I have with my minor clients.
On Tuesday, the Supreme Court heard a case about what is commonly called conversion therapy for minors, or efforts by a licensed health professional to change or reduce same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria. At the center of the issue is a Colorado law that bans conversion therapy. Professionals who violate the law face thousands of dollars in fines and can even lose their license. The state argues the ban is, quote, based on overwhelming evidence that efforts to change a child's sexual orientation or gender identity are unsafe and ineffective.
And a state cannot be required to let its vulnerable young people waste their time and money on an ineffective, harmful treatment just because that treatment is delivered through words.
Kaylee Childs, a licensed Christian counselor who sued the state of Colorado, does not aim to change her client's orientation or gender identity, but helps them feel comfortable with their biological sex through a faith-based lens. Her lawyers argue the state law constrains what she's allowed to say during her sessions, thereby violating her right to free speech.
Here, Colorado can't satisfy any level of heightened scrutiny. It didn't seriously consider any less restrictive alternatives, and Colorado can't prove harm because it hasn't cited a study focusing on what's at issue here, voluntary speech between a licensed professional and a minor.
The debate hinged on whether therapy should be treated as medical conduct or speech. A majority of the justices seemed poised to side with Childs.
So what if someone who happened to be devoutly religious and actually relied more on the minister than the therapist? It seemed that that person would be equally dangerous.
If a doctor says, I know you identify as gay, and I'm going to help you accept that, and another doctor says, I know you identify as gay, and I'm going to help you to change that, and one of those is permissible and the other is not, that seems like viewpoint discrimination.
The High Court will deliver its ruling before the term ends next summer. Its decision could impact more than 24 states, which have similar laws that limit conversion therapy. We turn now to a leading Catholic voice on the gender ideology issue who previously worked as an attorney. Mary Rice Hasson is a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, where she co-founded and directs the center's Person and Identity Project. Mary, thanks for being with us. To get us started, this case centers on the term conversion therapy, but what do you make of that framing?
Yeah, so that's a deceptive phrase because the phrase conversion therapy was used in the past to describe abusive behaviorist techniques that really aren't used anymore. The problem is Colorado's law uses this exact phrase to distinguish and outlaw speech that aims to help people live in accord with their faith. So it's aimed at voluntary conversations, talk therapy, requested by a client to help them deal with unwanted sexual attractions or to feel more comfortable in their bodies. So this case is not about abusive techniques. It's about talk therapy and free speech.
That's very important context. And Mary, the justices need to consider whether the plaintiff's counseling is considered speech or a medical treatment that includes speech. Why is this distinction so important?
Yeah, it's a distinction that is tremendously important because, as everyone knows, the Constitution protects free speech. And for the government to regulate speech, it has to really show a high burden that this is really, really necessary. But states have more latitude to regulate medical treatments, including speech that might be incidental to the medical treatment. Now, Colorado here argues that Christian talk therapy, therapy that's designed to help people live in accord with their faith, to help them understand their feelings, they're arguing that's actually a medical treatment and therefore the state can ban it. But Kaylee Childs, who is the Christian counselor who brought this case, says, no, this is about speech. And what's happening here is really that the Colorado law is engaging in viewpoint discrimination because it's trying to ban speech that helps people align their faith and their behaviors and their feelings, whereas it will permit speech that supports LGBTQ ideology.
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson asked the counselor's attorney, Jim Campbell, about the so-called dangers of conversion therapy. Take a listen to their exchange.
I think there are like 25 states or something who have similar laws. So someone has some evidence related to the harmfulness of this activity, right?
Colorado certainly cites studies, but those studies suffer from significant flaws. The main flaw in all of them is that they lump together dissimilar approaches. They treat voluntary conversations the same as shock therapy.
Mary, can you give us more background on these studies they're talking about? Are they flawed?
Yes. So, in fact, the attorney for Counselor Childs was exactly right. The studies that the Colorado law tries to, and Justice Jackson was referring to, were really mostly older studies that looked at the question of whether what they called conversion therapy, which was primarily coercive techniques performed on adults related to same-sex attraction, whether that caused harm. And actually, the evidence in those studies was very ambiguous. It was not clear. But that's not what's at stake here. And that's the point that the attorney was making, that what we're talking about here is talk therapy, and it pertains to children, particularly children who are feeling not comfortable in their own bodies. There is no evidence, there are no studies that show that helping a child feel more comfortable with their body is somehow causing harm. So that's a misdirection. It's an attempt to lump together old studies that didn't apply and say, well, that's reason enough for the state to be able to ban speech that the state disagrees with.
And can you expand on that exact point? Can you speak about the importance of talk therapy specifically in helping children find peace with their biological body?
Sure. One thing we do know is that there are a lot of different reasons why a child could feel uncomfortable with their body or hate different body parts or feel uncertain about who they are. And so it's tremendously important for a counselor to be able to establish a really good relationship with the person and say, well, let's talk, let's understand who you are, let's explore these feelings when they came up, let's really dig deep. And yet this statute, this Colorado statute, is saying you can't have those conversations. The only thing you can do is to facilitate or assist someone in moving towards gender transition. So it's really viewpoint discrimination in terms of what these conversations are about. And that's why this case is so important, to uphold the rights of free speech and to give families and clients the ability to find a counselor who's going to work with them in accord with their own goals.
Yeah. You've already mentioned, and we talked about how conversion therapy is really being misconstrued here, but just to put a fine point on it, so-called conversion therapy is often tied to the Christian faith. But does the Catholic Church specifically have a stance on this practice? What is the Church's pastoral approach to those who struggle with same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria?
Yeah, the church doesn't take a position on whether or not someone's going to be able to reorient their feelings. But what the church does say is we're against coercion, against abusive behavior or conditioning techniques, but we do support techniques or conversations or talk therapy that's designed to help someone live in accord with their faith and with their beliefs. And oftentimes that involves understanding your past history, what led you to experience certain things, and then to really support the person in living in accord with integrity, in accord with their faith. And so that's the distinction. The church is not in favor of coercive, abusive techniques. It is in favor of helping people live their faith with integrity and to have those conversations and help people find the support that allows them to do that.
Mary Rice Hasson, I am so grateful for your expertise and for joining us for this important story. Thank you so much.
Thank you.